The harsh summer sun beat down on Ellie Anderson's skin as she settled onto her beach towel, the sound of crashing waves almost drowning out the excited shrieks of children building sandcastles nearby. She was treating herself to a rare day off, escaping the constant pressure of her job as a pediatric nurse to simply exist under the bright blue sky of Sandpiper Beach. She had just started applying sunscreen to her arms when she noticed him, a tall man with broad shoulders, sitting about 20 feet away, his skin already turning an angry shade of red. He was absorbed in a book, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he was well on his way to a painful sunburn. "Excuse me," Ellie called out, surprising herself with her boldness. When he didn't respond, she stood up and walked over to him, casting a shadow across his book. "I don't mean to bother you, but you're getting pretty burned." The man looked up, startled. His eyes were a startling shade of blue that contrasted with his dark hair, which was slightly tousled from the ocean breeze. "Am I?" he asked, glancing at his reddening shoulders with genuine surprise. "I guess I lost track of time." "Here," she said, holding out her bottle of sunscreen. "You should really put some on." He hesitated for a moment before accepting the bottle. "Thank you, that's very kind." His voice was deep and warm. "I'm not exactly a beach regular, I can tell," Ellie smiled. "Most people don't read Dostoevsky at the beach." He looked down at his book, Crime and Punishment, and laughed. "Not exactly light reading, is it? I'm Preston, by the way, Preston Ackerman, Ellie Anderson." She watched as he awkwardly tried to apply sunscreen to his back. "Need some help?" Preston looked embarrassed but nodded. "If you don't mind, I can't quite reach." As Ellie's hands moved across his shoulders, she noticed how tense they were. The man carried stress like it was part of his wardrobe. "You know, sunscreen works better if you apply it before you turn into a lobster." He laughed, and she felt some of the tension leave his muscles. "Noted for future reference, though I don't get to the beach often." "What do you do that keeps you so busy?" she asked, finishing up and wiping the excess sunscreen off her hands. "I run a company," he said vaguely. "Shipping logistics, it's not very exciting." "Sounds important, though," Ellie replied, standing back up. "Well, enjoy your book and try not to get burned again." Preston smiled up at her. "Thanks for the sunscreen and the help." Ellie returned to her spot, stealing glances at the mysterious man who'd gone back to his Russian literature. There was something compelling about him, not just his looks, though he was certainly attractive, but something in his demeanor, a kind of solitary intensity that made her curious. An hour later, as Ellie was packing up to leave, Preston approached her, holding out her sunscreen bottle. "Thanks again," he said. "You saved me from what would have been a very uncomfortable evening." "Happy to help," she replied, tucking the bottle into her beach bag. "This might be forward," he said, running a hand through his hair, "but would you like to get a coffee sometime? There's a great little place just up from the beach." Ellie hesitated. She didn't make a habit of accepting dates from strangers, but there was something genuine about his request. "Actually, I was just about to grab some lunch at the beachfront cafe. If you're hungry, you're welcome to join me." His face brightened. "I'd like that." The cafe was a casual open-air spot with views of the ocean. As they settled at a table, Ellie learned that Preston was new to the area, having moved from Seattle just 3 months ago. "So you run a shipping company?" she asked, sipping her iced tea. Preston nodded. "Ackerman Global. We handle international freight primarily. What about you?" "I'm a pediatric nurse at Ocean View Children's Hospital," she said. "I work in the oncology department." His expression softened. "That must be challenging." "It is, but it's also incredibly rewarding," she replied. "The kids are amazing, so resilient. They teach me something new every day." Their conversation flowed easily as they ate, discovering shared interests in hiking and classical music. Preston was articulate and thoughtful, asking questions about her work and listening intently to her answers. By the time they finished lunch, Ellie felt a connection forming that both excited and unnerved her. "I've enjoyed this," Preston said as they stood to leave. "Could I get your number? I'd like to see you again." Ellie found herself nodding, entering her number into his phone. As they said goodbye, she couldn't help but wonder if she'd ever hear from the interesting stranger with the sunburned shoulders and the Russian novel. 2 days later, Ellie was finishing a 12-hour shift when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi Ellie, it's Preston from the beach. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner this weekend," she smiled, feeling a little flutter of excitement as she typed her reply. "I'd love to." Preston suggested a restaurant called Marina View for Saturday evening, and Ellie was surprised when she looked it up. It was one of the most exclusive places in town, requiring reservations weeks in advance. When Saturday arrived, Ellie chose a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes and pulled her auburn hair into a loose updo. As she applied a light touch of makeup, she tried to tamp down the butterflies in her stomach. It had been a while since she'd been on a proper date, her demanding work schedule making relationships difficult to maintain. Preston was waiting outside the restaurant when her rideshare pulled up. He looked different in a tailored charcoal suit that accentuated his athletic build, his earlier casualness replaced with an air of confidence that was almost intimidating. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes warm as they met hers. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly feeling underdressed. "You clean up nicely yourself." The restaurant was elegant without being stuffy, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the harbor. The maitre d' greeted Preston by name and led them to a secluded table by the window. "Do you come here often?" Ellie asked once they were seated. "Occasionally for business dinners," he replied. "The food is excellent." When the waiter came, Preston ordered a bottle of wine that Ellie recognized as particularly expensive from her limited knowledge. "Is this a special occasion?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He smiled, a hint of shyness breaking through his polished exterior. "Meeting someone like you at the beach feels special enough to celebrate." As they enjoyed their meal, Ellie found herself increasingly drawn to Preston. He was intelligent and well-traveled, but also genuinely interested in her life and work. He listened attentively as she told him about a young patient who had just finished his last round of chemotherapy, his eyes reflecting her own mix of hope and caution. "You speak about your patients with such compassion," he observed. "It's clear you love what you do." "I do," she admitted. "Even on the hardest days, what about you? Do you enjoy running your company?" A shadow crossed his face. "It's complicated. The company was my father's dream more than mine, but I've grown into the role over the years." "Is your father still involved in the business?" "He passed away 5 years ago," Preston said quietly. "Heart attack, very sudden." "I'm sorry," Ellie said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "That must have been difficult," he nodded, turning his hand to hold hers. "It was. We had a complex relationship. He was a brilliant businessman, but not always an easy father." The vulnerability in his admission touched her. As the evening progressed, they moved from wine to coffee, neither wanting the night to end. When they finally left the restaurant, Preston suggested a walk along the moonlit harbor. "I should tell you something," he said as they strolled. "I wasn't entirely forthcoming about my company when we met. Ackerman Global isn't just a shipping company, it's one of the largest maritime logistics corporations in the world." Ellie stopped walking, looking up at him with surprise. "So you're not just running a company, you're running a major corporation," he nodded, watching her reaction carefully. "I didn't want that to color your impression of me. People tend to act differently when they find out." She considered this for a moment. "So when you said you were reading at the beach because you don't get there often?" "I was taking my first day off in months," he admitted. "My assistant practically forced me out of the office." Ellie laughed softly. "Well, I'm glad she did. You're not upset that I wasn't entirely honest," she shook her head. "I understand wanting to be seen for who you are, not what you do or have. Though it does explain the restaurant choice and the wine." Relief washed over his face, and as they continued their walk, he tentatively took her hand. His touch was warm and reassuring, and Ellie found herself hoping this wasn't the last time they'd be together like this. When he dropped her off at her apartment building, Preston hesitated before leaning down to kiss her cheek. "I'd like to see you again," he said softly. "I'd like that too," she replied, her heart quickening at his nearness. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm of seeing each other whenever Ellie's shift schedule allowed. Preston took her to upscale restaurants and performances at the Symphony, but Ellie was most charmed by the simpler moments when he brought takeout to her apartment after a grueling shift, or when they hiked along coastal trails, talking for hours. One evening, after they'd been dating for about a month, Preston invited her to his home for the first time. As her car approached the address he'd given her, Ellie's jaw dropped. The house was a modern architectural marvel perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, all glass and steel and breathtaking views. "You live here?" she asked as he greeted her at the door. "It's a recent purchase," he said, looking slightly embarrassed by her reaction. "I wanted a place where I could see the ocean. Come in, I'll give you a tour." The interior was stunning but surprisingly warm, with comfortable furniture and shelves filled with books. One room was dedicated entirely to a grand piano. "Do you play?" she asked, running her fingers lightly over the keys. "I do," he nodded. "It helps me think. My mother was a concert pianist. She insisted I learn. Will you play something for me?" Preston sat at the piano, and his fingers moved across the keys with surprising grace, filling the room with a haunting Chopin nocturne. Ellie watched, mesmerized by this new side of him, the CEO transformed into an artist. When he finished, she applauded softly. "That was beautiful." "You're full of surprises, Preston Ackerman," he smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "So are you, Ellie Anderson." They moved to the kitchen where Preston had prepared dinner himself, a simple but delicious pasta dish. "No personal chef," she teased. "I prefer to cook for myself when I can," he replied. "Though admittedly, that's not as often as I'd like." As they ate on the terrace overlooking the ocean, Ellie realized she was falling for him, this complex man who ran a global corporation but still took the time to cook dinner and play the piano. But she also felt a growing unease about the disparity in their lives. "Preston," she said finally, setting down her wine glass, "can I ask you something? Anything?" "Why me? You could be with anyone, models, socialites, people from your world. Why are you interested in a pediatric nurse who offered you sunscreen on a beach?" He looked at her thoughtfully. "Because when you offered me that sunscreen, you weren't looking for anything in return. You saw someone in need and you helped them. Do you know how rare that kind of genuine kindness is in my world?" He reached across the table for her hand. "And then I got to know you, your compassion, your strength, the way you fight for your patients. You're real, Ellie, in a way most people in my life aren't." His words touched her deeply, and when he kissed her later that evening, standing on the terrace with the sound of waves crashing below, Ellie felt herself letting go of her reservations and trusting in the connection they were building. As summer turned to fall, their relationship deepened. Ellie introduced Preston to her small circle of friends, who were initially intimidated by his status but soon won over by his unpretentious nature. He worked long hours, sometimes taking calls in the middle of the night due to international time differences, but always made time for her. One rainy Sunday morning, as they lay in bed in Ellie's modest apartment, Preston's phone rang with an urgent call from his office. She listened as he handled a crisis involving a stranded cargo ship with the calm authority of someone used to making multi-million-dollar decisions before breakfast. "Sorry about that," he said when he hung up. "Don't be," she replied. "It's fascinating to see you in CEO mode. It's so different from how you are with me." He pulled her closer. "This is the real me. The CEO is just a role I play. Both are real," she said thoughtfully. "They're just different parts of who you are." Preston looked at her with a mix of surprise and appreciation. "You understand me better than people I've known for years." Despite the deepening of their relationship, challenges began to emerge. Preston's high profile meant occasional unwanted attention, and Ellie was uncomfortable when a photo of them at a charity gala appeared in a local business publication, with speculation about the mystery woman in the CEO's life. "I'm sorry about that," Preston said when he saw her reaction to the article. "I should have warned you this might happen." "It's not your fault," she replied, though the invasion of privacy bothered her more than she wanted to admit. "I'm just not used to being in the public eye." The real test came when Preston needed to travel to Singapore for a major business negotiation. "Come with me," he suggested. "We could extend the trip, explore the city together." "I can't just drop everything and fly across the world," she protested. "I have patients who depend on me. Shifts I'm scheduled for." The disappointment on his face was evident, but he nodded in understanding. "Of course, I wasn't thinking." While Preston was away, Ellie struggled with doubts about their relationship. The distance between their worlds felt greater than ever, and she wondered if they were fooling themselves thinking they could bridge it. When one of her young patients took a turn for the worse, requiring her to work several overnight shifts in a row, she was too exhausted to even properly communicate with Preston on their brief video calls. "You look tired," he observed during one call, the concern evident in his voice despite the thousands of miles between them. "I am," she admitted. "We lost a patient yesterday, a 6-year-old boy I've been treating for over a year." "Ellie, I'm so sorry. Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head, tears threatening. "Not really. How are your meetings going?" "They don't matter right now. I wish I was there with you." His genuine concern touched her, but also highlighted the fundamental difference in their situations while she was dealing with life and death. He was negotiating business deals worth millions. When Preston returned from Singapore, he came directly to her apartment from the airport, looking exhausted but determined. "I missed you," he said simply, pulling her into an embrace. "I missed you too," she replied, realizing as she said it how true it was. Despite her doubts, his absence had left a void in her life that nothing else could fill. As they settled on her couch, Preston took her hands in his. "I've been thinking a lot about us while I was away," he began, "about our different lives and the challenges we face." Ellie's heart sank, expecting him to end things. "I've been thinking about that too. And I realized something," he continued. "My life before you was efficient but empty. I had success, money, power, all the things I was raised to value, but I wasn't happy. You've shown me what really matters." She looked at him in surprise. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Ellie, and I don't want our differences to come between us. I want to find a way to make this work." Tears welled in her eyes. "I love you too, but I don't know how we bridge these gaps. I can't become part of your world and you can't abandon yours. Maybe we create our own world," he suggested. "One that incorporates elements of both but is uniquely ours." The following months were a process of doing exactly that. Preston adjusted his schedule to be more compatible with Ellie's. Sometimes working from a small office he set up near the hospital so they could have lunch together during her breaks. He became involved with the Children's Hospital, first through personal donations and later by establishing a foundation to support families of pediatric cancer patients with non-medical expenses. Ellie, in turn, made efforts to understand Preston's business world better, accompanying him to important events and learning about the global shipping industry that had been his family's legacy for generations. "You know more about maritime regulations than most of my executives," he joked one evening after she'd asked a particularly insightful question about a deal he was working on. "I'm a quick study," she replied with a smile, "and I care about what matters to you." As winter gave way to spring, they settled into a rhythm that honored both their individual paths and their shared journey. Preston continued to run his corporation with the same dedication, but he'd learned to delegate more effectively, creating space in his life for what truly mattered. Ellie remained committed to her patients, drawing strength from Preston's support during the difficult days that were an inevitable part of her work. On the anniversary of the day they met, Preston took Ellie back to Sandpiper Beach. The weather was cooler than it had been that first day, but the sun was bright, glinting off the waves as they walked along the shore. "Remember how burned I was getting when you first approached me?" Preston asked, smiling at the memory. You were practically glowing red, she laughed. I couldn't just watch you suffer. Your kindness that day changed my life, he said, stopping to face her. Before you, I was just going through the motions, living the life that was expected of me. You helped me see there was so much more. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the water, Preston dropped to one knee in the sand, pulling a small box from his pocket. Ellie Anderson, you offered sunscreen to a stranger a year ago, not knowing you were saving him from more than just a sunburn. You were saving him from a life half-lived. He opened the box to reveal a stunning but tasteful diamond ring. Will you marry me? Ellie's hand flew to her mouth, tears of joy filling her eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. As Preston slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Ellie marveled at how a simple act of kindness had led to this moment. Neither of them could have predicted that day on the beach where their paths would lead, but standing together as the waves lapped at their feet, the future stretched before them, full of promise. Their wedding, 6 months later, was an intimate affair held in the garden of Preston's cliff-top home, with only close friends and family in attendance. Ellie wore a simple but elegant gown, and several of her young patients who were well enough to travel served as flower girls and ring bearers. Preston's normally stern business associates were visibly moved by the personal vows the couple exchanged, promises to support each other's dreams while building a shared vision for their future. In the years that followed, Preston and Ellie found that the balance they'd worked so hard to achieve only strengthened with time. Preston restructured Ackerman Global to be more family-friendly and ethically focused, implementing policies that benefited employees with caregiving responsibilities. Ellie continued her work at the hospital, eventually becoming the director of pediatric oncology nursing, where she mentored younger nurses and advocated for improved patient care protocols. They welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lily, 2 years after their wedding, followed by a son, James, 18 months later. Their home became a place filled with laughter, music, and the occasional important business call taken from a home office with a toddler on Preston's lap. One summer day, 5 years after they first met, Preston and Ellie returned to Sandpiper Beach with their children. As Lily and James built sandcastles near the water's edge, Preston pulled Ellie close, kissing her temple. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, leaning into his embrace. "I'm thinking about how differently this day could have gone if you hadn't noticed a stranger getting sunburned," he replied. "How many moments in life hinge on such small decisions?" "I'm just glad I had sunscreen that day," she smiled, watching their children play in the same spot where their story began. "So am I," Preston agreed, his voice full of gratitude. "So am I." As the sun warmed their skin, properly protected with sunscreen, now Ellie reflected on the journey they'd taken together. From that first chance meeting to the life they'd built, it had never been about erasing their differences or one of them changing to fit the other's world. Instead, they'd created something new together, a life that honored both their individual strengths and their shared values. The CEO and the nurse, brought together by a simple act of kindness on a sunny beach, had found in each other not just love, but a partner who made them more fully themselves. And that, Ellie knew as she watched Preston chase their laughing children across the sand, was the greatest gift of all.